Hello all. I'm really happy to see you all in this live. First things first, we need to check if you could hear my voice clearly. So you could say like I can hear you in the comment so that I could understand that my voice is clear. Once that is done, we could move to the next step. So for the first time, we are doing yeah. Once again. So you can let us know if you could able to hear the voice clearly. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yes, I happy to see a lot of members in YouTube. So this is the first time we are going live both in YouTube and Facebook. So pardon us if you're facing any technical glitch. So this is also our first time. We're also learning it. So it's almost like 4:59. Yes, let's get started on time and also end on time. That's very important. So as you all know, this is Harish Srinivasan, co-founder of Infinite Engineers and chief curator at Ology host. So as part of Infinite Engineers, we always tried new experiments along the way. We believe in learning by doing. That's what we actually tell students, and that's all we practice as well. So hands-on science tournament is our new experiment where we thought of empowering children with superpowers. Superpowers is something that you can call it as 21st century skills or life skills. So we want to empower children with skills, but in a different medium. So we used to give them challenges and then see if we could improve on the creativity, teamwork, and other things. So as part of our Superpowers of Host campaign, we thought of we listed down 18 superpowers along the way. And to start off with, we thought of diving deeper into each one of the superpower with an expert. Okay, so we also thought of would learn from them on what is that skill, how we could nurture it, how important it is, and it'll also be helpful from listening from the expert's personal view, so that it would be great. Okay, so today I'm very curious because I'm going to explore on the topic curiosity, and we have with us. I'm going to introduce her. I'm going to like also add her online very soon. So that's it for the intro. I'm just adding. Great, Dr. Sona Abraham. Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Hi, hear you, Harsh.
Perfect. Thank you for joining. And I knew Dr. Sona through LinkedIn, and as a person, I know as a doctor, as a parent of two kids, and importantly, she's curious. So we are very eager to understand how she had retained that curiosity over the period of time. So I've made some couple of not couple of questions, more than like 5-10 questions, but still she wanted it to be like as natural as possible. So we'll go by the flow with her experience. So I take it forward to Dr. Sona. It would be great if you could brief you, I mean, to add more depth to introduction, and we could start from there.
Okay. So, just to kind of give a little background about myself, I grew up in pretty much part Calcutta, part Delhi. Completed my 12th grade from Delhi, and I always, for some reason, since I was maybe as young as 3 years old, did want to be a doctor. Probably I didn't know why I wanted to be a doctor. I just knew I wanted to help in some way, take care of people in some way. I think that was really the motive behind it. And I think, and once I was done with that, I after my schooling, I moved to Trivandrum for my med school. I actually wanted to stay away from home, sort of to feel how life would feel, sort of living it by myself. And then after I finished my MBBS from Trivandrum, I went on to the US for my residency and fellowship. And then once I'd finished, I think everybody expected me to stay back, but somehow I wanted to. And I think while I was just reflecting on it today, and what I realized was I was passionate about research. I wanted to do something in the area of diabetes at that point of time. I mean, that was back when I was like 23, 24. And back in the US, while I was training, I realized research, or so exploring my curiosity, was really trying to find a novel cure for diabetes. That was my young dream at that point of time. And I realized, well, how foolish was that? I mean, and then I realized the world of research was far more murkier than I envisioned as a young student. And the whole process of how you go about research sort of disillusioned me to some extent. And what I realized was I really did want, what I loved is seeing my patients. What I did, I loved the connection with my patients, taking care of them. And secondly, I love teaching. So I think those were the two drivers. I actually wanted to kind of be involved in teaching in some way. So medical education was what I thought was my calling. So invariably along the way, so it's I met my life partner, and I think she's pulled me into this area of like education research, and my own research in while I see my patients took me down an emotions research area. So that's how I think my curiosity has evolved, and I think it's still evolving as we go.
Superb. That's great to hear. So I just take a moment to not ask audience to type I am curious. I mean, there are people I could see uh, around like 18, 20 people in YouTube, around 10 in Facebook. So I'm just going to ask them to type I am curious. So to unlock the next question. So because I feel they are curious enough, that's the reason they have joined this live session as well, because they want to learn about it. And my first question is this, because it could be blunt, it could be stupid, but I'm going to ask this: is there like one definition for curiosity? I mean, is there like something from textbook? We have been brought up that education system, so I want to know if there is like one definition for curiosity. Yeah.
See, Harsh, I mean, Harsh, I'm a rebel of sorts. I don't believe in like the standard education policy to some degree, and you probably noticed that like that's something I kind of take up often. I believe that at the end of the day, I think uh, we all have an inbuilt curiosity. I think we all want to know why. See, every time as a kid, say for example, your parents tell you, or your teachers tell you, don't do that, don't do this. You want to know why. I want to do that. So if you're going to tell me no, then I need to be convinced. And if you can't give me a satisfactory answer, then I am going to, some certain things you can let go, but certain things it burns you up. And the more somebody says no, the more it makes you even more curious. So I think that's there in all of us. It depends on how controlling our parents have been, how controlling our environments have been, whether that gets, squelched or that is encouraged. Maybe for me personally speaking, having gone to the US was probably a reason to kind of believe in letting that curiosity go, because I think the one difference which I did find between the schooling system in India, college in India, and probably I think the one good thing that I take back from the US was really encouraging and empowering curiosity and independent thinking, which I think was the textbook knowledge. So every time I would quote a textbook, my professors would be, no, 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 that's not what we're doing. We're just, what do you think? So it has to be original answers in terms of like what comes out of your head, retrieving it from, and putting it into your own words and expressing that. So that's, I think, my way so of understanding of curiosity.
Great. I think my next question also, like, I mean, you have partly answered it, because I just want to understand what makes you curious now. I mean, it could have been like different at different point in age, but I just think there could be some connection from your childhood to till now, some connection that you could make to empower you to be curious even now. I mean, even as you grow up, that is
I think probably I think the curiosity in me was rekindled, I would say, having been a parent. And I think maybe in all of us to some extent. I think when we finish college, we go for work, depending on our work environments. If you're not in a research setting, most work environments just tell you do this, do that, you're going to be paid for this. So it just pretty much takes out whatever curiosity or innovation or jugaad or whatever you want to call it, that is intrinsic to all of us. And I think the fact that having a kid who's constantly, and especially I think the one thing differently which I've done as far as being a parent is letting my kids be them. And I think in letting my kids be them, I think the one thing I've learned is they keep asking me a gazillion questions, most of which I have no answer for, and I feel like an idiot most of the time. They tell me, haven't you heard of this? Haven't you heard of that? I'm like, okay, you tell me. Why don't you research that and come and tell me about that? So it's like, so it's been that shared conversation which made me start to realize how young kids are when they ask such deep, engaging questions. And I think as adults, most of us in our community, we shut them down far too early.
Hmm. True. So my next question was supposed to be a follow-up of that. It's like very important question. Like I just put it up there, kids versus adults. So I'm not comparing in any case, but I could really like go back and look at when I was a kid and
Hmm.
even see young kids now. They don't mind asking questions. They ask so many questions when they're young. But as I grow up, that sense inside me, which actually restricts me to ask questions. And I feel that as we grow adults, are we stopping? Stop being
I'll
curious.
tell you why. I think, see, that's part of where my emotions research has taken me down. Because what I realized is as you grow older and as you become more aware of yourself, as you start caring about what your peers think of you, as you start wanting, so till kids are very young, early in their growth and development, they are pretty individualistic. Me. So maybe till 7 or something. After that, they are really longing to connect to another person. And the problem is in this process of trying to fit into a group or a peer group or being liked rather and not being bullied or thrown away from the group, you start fitting in, and fitting in means silencing yourself and or else feeling judged. Now, so for me personally, I'll give you an example. See, I think a lot of it is so much of the bias that exists deep in society. See, I was a Mallu kid growing up in Delhi. So I was darker by standard. So it's always that question of feeling like looked differently upon, judged. So when I was back in Kerala for my med school, I strangely didn't know how to read or write Malayalam. I mean, I could communicate in Malayalam, but I can't read or write Malayalam. So I was still the odd man out. Again, I was like, so when I went to the US, I'm the brown in the US. When I come back to Delhi, so it's like I just constantly had this feeling that I'm not fitting in. And the question that I felt conflicted with myself was, should I fit in? Should I? So I changed who I was, my entire personality to try and fit in. And then I realized over time that it was sort of jarring with who I was fundamentally.
Okay.
That is where I think everybody is at. Why you lose curiosity as you approach your teenagers, and
Hmm.
that sort of sticks on, because depending on then what boss you are under, which college you go to, depending on if they are somebody who's a nurturing person, who's
Hmm.
an empowering person, say you, that's great, they just pull it out of you. That's something that would allow that curiosity and that feeling of not judged. So what I feel the best definition I would say is creating an environment of psychological and emotional safety for somebody to express their thoughts
Hmm.
without feeling, that they're going to be shut up or made fun of.
So that applies even in workplace, right? Not just in school and even
Absolutely.
in workplace. And I just want to bring back what the two parents had said in a recent question where we asked, uh, uh, do you feel as we grow, curiosity decreases? But they told no, the curiosity only takes a different form. We are still curious, but expressing
About
in
different things maybe, and sometimes it's about different things. It's like my younger kid may be interested in how everything works. Today I may know how everything works. My personal curiosity is people. So I like to look at people as being puzzles, and
Hmm.
that is deeply engaging to me. So a lot of my research is about human behavior, so the learning brain, so everything comes back to the mind, which as a doctor, what I realized is I started getting bored with endocrinology, to be honest,
Hmm.
because there are a bunch of things I already know them. There's nothing exciting, anything more that I know. I felt like I was just doing a job. And
Okay.
somewhere or the other, but then there were things which I felt like I was not being able to meet all the needs of my patient, and some gaps remain. So I
Hmm. Hmm.
started exploring that. So how can I help? So why can't I do that? I can send the patient to somebody else, but can I learn that? So in trying to help my patients, and helping my kids, because both my kids, to some degree, my older one has dyspraxia, and my son has some elements of dyslexia. And while I started researching, so a lot of my research actually started with trying to help my older son with I didn't know what dyspraxia was as a doctor, and so I had to read up a lot of neuroscience, cognitive science, so a lot of my self research was initially centering around special learning disability. So it became a broad area then, because it was like there was so much, and it was not something I learned in school or college about. And but it was a need, because I could see my kid struggling. And there was a time when he was 7 years old where he said, I'm going to kill myself, because he was really struggling. And therein started a much more passionate journey about trying to make sure it's not just him. Any other kid who feels a failure at school, I've started to believe that there is something we are doing wrong as educators and parents. Sometimes it's not so, teachers may not know, but I think as parents, in the least, we can love and accept our children as they are. And I think very often the problem happens, the teacher is okay with a child getting a 50 or a fail, but the parents are not. And the parents start getting obsessed about those marks and things like that. And that actually causes far more psychological trauma to the child, which leads to a lower self-worth, which can put them at risk for future depression or even suicidal tendencies. So that's why then, therein came the mental health part of it, in terms of, relationship health, mental health. So all those became like, curiosity leading from one thing, I ended up, leaning to many other areas.
That's great to know. I'll also like take a moment to understand what audience. I mean, there are parents who are watching this, children are watching this. Maybe you could, to the audience, you could type what you're so curious about now. Maybe you could type in the chat, and we could showcase something to Dr. Sona as well. So you could go on and type what you're so curious about now. So, and I'll also like leading to the next question of boring. Because many times even I see like boring is seen to be like a negative word. I mean, we can't sit simply, you can't be bored, do this, go to tuition. We are all like very preoccupied, especially the kids. There is no time for them to like think, relax, or even just be bored. I just want to connect boring with curiosity.
No, I think this is something which I started thinking far more deeply about. So I was also the parent who was busy, who had no time. And for me too, as a parent, my struggling between job and heading a department, taking care of my kids, my priority was really to keep them busy somehow, so that they don't eat my head. So that was me like 2-3 years ago. And then I realized it's not working. So it's about really, as a parent, you're feeling your way through, you're seeing how things are working. So a couple of years ago, I realized, I would send them for a baker's class, this class, a brain gym class, a blah, and, whatever, just doing little. I thought as a parent that I'm like, allowing different parts of their brain to be activated and all that. That was me before I embarked more deeply into this. But then I started realizing that, my kids started looking bored, and they're like fed up. And I started to think, and my older son would say, is it fair that you go to work every day and you don't get a Sunday off? Then why do you expect us kids to study on a Sunday and on the week? So I'm like, that's a mighty good point, absolutely correct. I totally second you on that. So then summer holidays. So invariably, most summer holidays for a lot of people now is a new culture of a summer camp. So I decided to go against that. So for the last 2 years in a row, I've decided you just be home, do whatever you. And I think the other part of the feeling bored part, in terms of how to transition from feeling bored. So one is creating an environment so that they will be bored, because they're nothing else to, keep them busy. And what I started realizing as an adult, I have not had a chance to be bored, because I've been busy, too busy. So it wasn't until I started cutting some slack in my career, in terms of, taking consciously, intentionally, that suddenly I was like, what do I do? And that's when, I allowed my creative pursuits to kind of, take hold of me. So I've realized that children also need to be given that environment. So we don't have a TV, we don't have, I mean, before all the digital devices
Okay.
started because of the pandemic, we had no TV. We pretty much, they had either friends, or they could read, or they could, play Jenga or Lego or whatever, or do whatever. We could talk. We could just talk. And
Okay.
because it's something I have felt deeply, because I've gone through a divorce, and having seen my ex-spouse was an IIT-IIM guy, head of a financial firm, and what I realized, what was lacking was the human connect. And I personally felt that I don't want my boys to grow up to men like that. And there was a question, what I once asked my older son, how do I model to you what a good parent or a good father should be or a good husband should be, so that tomorrow, you know, um, I think I think we could be great at our careers, but if our personal lives suck, I think everything goes for a toss. Every achievement you have feels hollow. And my oldest son, at that point of time, he was probably like 9 or 10. He said, do one thing. We don't need anything. You just teach us how to be a good father and a good husband, and we'll learn from you. So it was sort of like role playing in fun for them to kind of, I stepped into a role. But
Okay.
suddenly I realized sort of this was sort of who I felt more comfortable being, because I'd always been a tomboy growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
then started my inquiry into gender identity research. As an endocrinologist, that's something that's often come up for me personally.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. So our life circumstances and our situations push us more into a certain area of curiosity. And I
Yes.
think giving children the opportunity to be bored and being there to engage with their curiosity is also as important to allow that curiosity to blossom.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for bringing that point. From boring, it actually takes us to a different level of curiosity. I mean, I feel even that is the starting point. Even we should be bored enough to go into the next level of doing things. So I'll just go go to a fun part where I'm excited to know like what fascinating questions that you got from your kids. I mean, kids. I could also listen to parents who said like they are asking so many questions, out of the box questions where they could not able to answer it. But I feel that's a secondary part. We should be first listening to them first. So what was your fascinating question that you received from your kids? Yeah.
See, I think the one question that always sticks with me, and that made me aware of how deeply and how philosophically kids as young as say 7 or 8 can think, which it had not crossed my mind before. There was an instance for some reason. I mean, this my son came to me up and asked, my younger one, he was like I think 7 at that time. He came up to me and asked, we've gone up in an aeroplane up in the stratosphere and all that. We've gone up in a rocket to outer space, but we haven't seen heaven. We all talk about pray to God, you'll go to heaven or you go to hell. Nobody's seen all these things. And that was a very interesting question that he asked. So to encourage that, I said, what do you think? What do you think is heaven? So he said, well, so he let his imagination run a bit, and he said, well, there should be good food, there should be clean air, clean water, people I love. And then suddenly after he sort of went through that whole thing in his mind, he sort of captured it in a nutshell and told me, when I'm surrounded by the people I love, that to me is heaven. And in some ways today, during the pandemic, I think I've tried to inculcate that model, because what I started off my pilot Facebook remote learning platform eventually became, it's all people I care about who were friends who I know deeply. And in some way, so this 3 months have been extremely difficult on a personal front in terms of, jobs and things like that and how things have turned out. And but despite that, being next to family and friends, my mood is always upbeat. And I realized what I started out as a random thing, and I think now I take off from my son's, curious question, that now, yes, I mean, I really feel like I'm in heaven. I mean, being next to my family and friends, so our emotional and psychological health, if it's good, everything else follows. So something that followed from a very simple thing, I think it had very profound meaning.
Great. And when they ask certain questions that, for example, it could be something about the games they play, And if you don't know the answer, like how do you react first? I mean,
I tell them flat out that sometimes I tell them, you're going over my head. I don't understand one word. Please come back and tell me that again. Slow down. So sometimes when with my older son, I noticed he's very calmer. He's able to articulate it with a certain sense of a global picture. He'll say there are like three parts the way I look at. So he's like already organized that information in his head when he says that.
okay.
My younger son, he's always so excited. He's bustling with ideas. So his energy is such that half the time I can't make any sense. So he slows down. Then I tell him, then please explain it to me. Sometimes if I don't know, I'll tell them, why don't you go look it up? And, I'll sometimes, flaunt the question back to my older son. Can you understand what he's telling? Can you explain that to me? So in some ways, I model the fact that I'm actually trying to understand if I'm struggling. And between us, I think that's also part of how teamwork works, right? I mean, and in some ways, I'm trying to model that to them too, because not one person can have all the answers. And I think it's also important between the kids also to understand that it's not that you are the only one who has all the bright, because I have to deal with that sibling rivalry also that stems from I have all the bright ideas, you are an idiot. So it's also trying to kind of teach them these very important skills that you allow for the other person to express their thought in their view, and make an effort to be patient and try to understand what they're trying to say.
Great. And I'll also like take a moment again to ask audience there, because some of the parents are also there. So you could also type some of the fascinating questions that you had received from your kids. Or if children are watching this, you could also type some of your curious questions that you want to find answers to. So you can type in the chat so that we could also see that. And to an extension of, I mean, there is one thing where you said there is no TV, newspaper. I'm in certain homes, even including my home, that's the most impossible thing to do. But still, is it something that you had planned well before that should not be there? Or what is the reason?
It's been 2-3 years now. It's been 2-3 years now. So I think, but the difference is now that since the pandemic happened, I mean, as I'm also struggling between working from home and, being everything, I mean, running my entire household, doing other things with many other projects that I am working on. I
Okay.
have had to give them far more device time than I like. But that being said, I've started to think a little differently about it. I had to change my mindset to some degree, because I started realizing, if you think about us as adults, aren't we on our device all the time? We're
Okay.
doing it. So the question is, I think what is more important than telling them not to use a device is how to use a device more responsibly. How to be more self-regulated about what, when. So earlier, what I noticed 3 months ago, if I was to tell them switch off, it's dinner time or whatever, they would struggle. It would be like can't. So I think that priming over 3 months, it's like now when I say dinner time, it's like, okay, device is off. So that much of self-regulation has improved, and it has been a habit. And I think it's about all of us too, right? We are all addicted to devices, I would say. And we are all, because we are doing different things with it. I mean, we are engaged. And my young son says, look, I am not watching any random video. I am watching, say, something that involves creating a new Jenga design. Why is that wrong? And I am like, well, it's not really wrong. I enjoy seeing all those things too. So then I can't, because I am looking for ideas. Because sometimes, as they say, when you see a lot of ideas, it's like 3-4 different ideas may merge together in your head, and that's creativity too. And that's what he's telling me. Don't give me a blank slate. Sometimes I'm a blank slate, so then that part, so I'm trying to, merge the fact that tech is here to stay. Social media is here to stay. And as difficult as it was for me, sometimes I feel like switching off my phone and throwing it away. But I have realized I will first learn how to manage myself, and hopefully then model that to my kids too. So that's been my struggle.
Great. I think we got couple of questions. I'm just going to like show like Kavita had asked. I'm very sorry. I don't know whether it's a kid or a parent, but they asked like, do people exist in other
Probably should have asked parents these questions. Like mine is very interested about outer space. Like just yesterday he was asking me about quarks, and I'm like, at 10, how did you hear about quarks? He's like, about the atmosphere. You see, it's all made up of atoms. It's not like air is nothing. Air is made up of atoms. So I think it's what we are realizing, I think they're exposed to a lot more than we were exposed. So our childhood was really about being present. It was like playing with the friends. So a lot of it was human. With
Yeah.
our kids, they are a lot more of it is videos, TV, games and things that they're seeing. So their minds are, you know, actually not present. They're, in there somewhere in outer space only.
Okay.
And I think that is a thing we'll have to deal with as we get along.
Okay. So someone has asked, I mean, we're not going to answer it in detail.
I
Some of it
understand.
asked where it's God. And
I think it's important as questions. See, when kids ask us these questions,
yeah.
to ask them back, to reflect it back on them. So help them break it down. It's like, so I think one thing which we need to teach in schools is how to think about research. Not see what we are, I would say back in training in India, and how it's like do a research project. Means I would have my seniors tell me just copy paste something, just change one variable and you're done. This is how
Okay.
I was taught research. And that was like the most crappiest way to get anybody passionate about research. The
Mhm.
reality is this, I'm curious about this. Now, how do I break that question down into a few more parts? Can I start answering a few of those parts? So I think, so I believe in exposing our metacognition of how we approach research. And I think that is something we can teach young kids even when they ask us questions like this.
Great. I think even parents are joining in this, I guess. So they're also asking some.
Good, yeah, interesting questions.
So,
Very good questions.
so that's great. I mean, keep. I mean, that's a starting point, I guess. I mean, to ask questions and then to listen to them and then reflect back on it. So I'm also like want to understand. I mean, what the while we're thinking about something or being curious, I mean, like what is happening in the brain? I mean, some sort of signs that we could understand from you.
See, I mean, the best way, or because I like to think in terms of analogies, which are actually much more easier to understand. So I believe that in a young child's mind, it is like unexplored territory. It's like a nascent, it's like Play-Doh, which is like, it's completely fresh. And I think what happens is as we are, it's like as the brain grows in a younger child, you are actually, your neurons are growing, but after you grow after a certain age, there are no more neurons that are added. So what is actually happening is those interconnections between what we call the synapses between different neurons, that is what is actually forming new connections. It's like new roads being built. And it's like there are two roads that are existing now. You are having a cross connection which is causing so that is what we term neuroplasticity. And I think that is something that can, what we think like of brain growth as being once you're 18, your brain doesn't grow. I think the way I look at it is I think our brains can be stretched, and that is really through the formation of newer synapses. And I think the best way I can say is like, say, if there is a field, where nobody's walked before, there is no path. But if you walk down a path, say, n number of times, at some point of time, it will look like a real road. And that's the way I think about creating new connections in the brain. So I think when we start exploring things, when we start igniting our brain, so to say, it's really more synapses that are interconnecting, causing that kind of a much more complex machinery to kind of light up in the brain when we are actually doing our thinking process.
Okay, great. I mean, there is so much thing that is happening in the brain without us knowing, but it's also interesting to know that signs of it as well. So I've just one more. I mean, the next question is, as a parent, is there some conscious decisions? I guess like TV, newspaper is one of the things that you told. But other than that, on your day-to-day practice to nurture this curiosity or any other skill, what conscious decisions have you taken from your lifestyle? You have changed that, and then to adapt more to improve that superpower or the skill.
I would say, see, as a parent, I struggle for time. Let me be very frank, because I have many things on my plate and I'm trying to be the right parent. But the practical limitation every parent today is probably struggling with is time.
Yeah.
And not just time. Sometimes, we could be in the same house with them free, but the question is, are we actively engaged or actively intentional about nurturing that curiosity, or being emotionally available? So it needs two parts. One is carving out pockets of time, maybe as rituals rather, because it's, so for me personally, it's like the morning time that they wake up for that little small bit that we have a huddle time. I mean, we cuddle and we hug and we are talking about a little bit of things, get them started. Once they're out of that, feeling drowsy part, then they go back to whatever they are doing. Meal times. I notice that my kids speak a lot during meal times. It's like somehow how their brains fire, and I think it's like recess at school. When you are actually, a lot of the fun conversation happens at recess when you're with friends and you're talking and chattering about stuff. So
Okay.
that's what, as at part of being homeschooling and remote schooling right now, I am the recess buddy in some ways. And the other part is bedtime. So because then by then it's like shutting down, and in some ways helping them clear their mind
Okay.
helps them sleep deeper. So I think sometimes they watch stuff, it's like, they're getting scared by that. They feel, oh, that was horror. So sometimes just having that talked about and given an extra hug and cuddle, so they sleep better. So carving out those points, for one, for engaging in discussion, two,
Okay.
for the socio-emotional learning, two, and in terms of bonding as a parent child. I think those are intentional practices. I slip up many days, but I think it's that I know that that is what I want to do. So every day I'm sort of measuring myself up to the goal which I have set for myself as a parent. So not just for the kids. So I think the one part about being a parent or a teacher or anybody is that you need to set goals for yourself as a parent. I don't think many parents do that, because we just think, gave them food, I did this, that's enough. And I think if we actually just want to even let them be, letting them be allows, they need to have that safety of coming up to us and talking. I mean, I have all sorts of questions about, sometimes even about videos they see, or girls, or sex, or things like that. As young as, I mean, I may have a question like, what are balls? What is the difference? So these are things our kids are going to be exposed. Now, I am an endocrinologist. I deal with enough kids and all these things. So it's something which I'm comfortable having. But I notice many parents may not be very comfortable having, and they'll usually shut them up. And I'll give you an example from my own life. This was about, I think, when my older one was 6 or 7. I think he went to school where they had iPads as part of their learning.
Okay.
And because of the dyspraxia, I actually thought that that was easier, because typing was easier than writing for him. But
Mm-mm.
this is one day where he asked me, "What does fuck you mean?" So I said, "That's a bad word. Let's not just say it." So what I realized is that he went and Googled it. So as uncomfortable as he had pretty much been exposed to porn right then and there. So I'm just saying is, we are in a very new era where devices are going to be there with our kids, and probably allowing them the room to talk to us and make it okay to have some of these conversations is very key. Otherwise, they'll go and ask their peers, because many times parents will like, "ऐसे बातें नहीं करते. We're not going to talk about such stuff in our house." So
Mm-mm.
they'll go to the wrong resources, or they'll search on the internet, and we have no idea what kind of information they're going to find out there. So as a parent, I think keeping that bridge of communication open, making sure that they realize no question is an unwanted question. I think we'll talk about every question and address all of them in the most mature way possible, understanding that this is only natural for kids to ask, and it is nothing awkward or something to be ashamed about. And the minute we make them feel ashamed, they'll usually coming back to, why we lose curiosity is because we shut them up most of. So
Mm-mm. That's a very valid point in terms of having that conversation. And as you said before, having as many data points as possible. Because
absolutely.
as you said, teachers have some data points in classroom, but they need to see so many children out there. But as a parent, and now even in this pandemic, this is an opportunity where they are like seeing them for 24/7, and to have the data points and how you process it. I mean, daily you observe them, but I'm just asking as a scientist or a researcher to see, like, I mean, you note something, but you see something, do you note it down, like how do you process it?
I mentally note it down. I kind of write about these things. So in some ways, if I would say my LinkedIn page or my Twitter page, even on my now on Facebook too, I sort of record clips of what we did or something like that. So in some ways, I'm actually observing myself as a fly on the wall, because I understand as a parent I have blind spots. Back in my journey of being a parent, I was always judged because my
Mhm.
kids had struggles, my older one, but it was always, there was a time when they were studying in a certain school, in a premium school in Delhi, where the principal was like, your kids, your son, he's the worst in the school. And there was a time he was shamed. And I was like, there's something your guys are not getting right, because the way I look at this child, he's sufficiently sharp, and I work with kids, and I'm a teacher myself, so I see there's a disconnect. If there's something wrong happening in class, and his writing in class is not, he's not writing in class, but he knows all this stuff, what is keeping can you just tell me what are you seeing in class? So that kind of curiosity was not there, and I was shut down as a parent. So it was like, at some point, many people, when I took him for counseling session or something, people, your son is going for counseling. So it was like, it's always this feeling of feeling shamed, that many, and I was told by, say, even my parents, don't tell anybody about this diagnosis or anything. And I think it's absolutely the wrong thing to do, because until teachers know, until other people know what he's struggling with, nobody will be able to empathize, because some disabilities are hidden and the child is struggling. He's putting, no child wants to do bad. He's extremely conscious about what his friends think of him. And when the teacher helps him out, the other kids think the teacher is being partial to him. So all these are things, I think the problem is really comes back to communication. And I think we need to, as society, move judgment aside and lean in more into trying to understand what is. And even as educators, so I have a different, I probably have a problem with the way assessments are done. Maybe I wouldn't have been so have this kind of a perspective if it had not been for my older son, where I know that if you're going to assess him on a written exam, that's
Mhm.
going to be like a huge gap between what I know is there in his head. And
Yeah.
so the best way that, say, one of the special educators told me, it's like he has a fast computer with a slow printer. Imagine how frustrated that child feels, because he's going to be only judged at the quality of the printer output.
Yeah.
So somewhere or the other, I think our systems don't know all this. Educators don't know all this. Teachers don't know all this. And what they do is, you are being lazy. That's the invariable feedback that he gets. And that hurts him very deeply. And he just shuts off. And I think as parents, then I think our role, as I said, I mean, we cannot change the system, but I think as parents, it's important to understand that your child is, if the child is not doing better, there is something that is an unmet need or a struggle that is probably hidden, which
Mm.
we need to be curious about, compassionate about, and try to kind of get that out of them.
Great. I mean, thanks for bringing this point. I know like a lot of parents are watching. I'm also like requesting them. We're almost like 5:40 here. We have 20 more minutes to go. So for parents, if you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask Dr. Sona, you can type in the chat. We could answer some of the questions here before. So we will proceed with the next set of questions. But if you can still type your questions so that we could make sure we will answer it. So my next question that I thought of asking was: is curiosity or any of the skills that importantly curiosity, since we brought that point here, is it mostly through personality trait? I mean, many believe that through birth they are naturally curious, that will stay forever, and we can't develop, we can't do anything about it. So
I
what
think
is your
curiosity can be nurtured. I would say, I don't think it's a personality trait. I think it is probably there in all of us, and I think it's the environments that we are exposed to that may make it bloom in one and be suppressed in another. Like they say, if a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment. Don't blame the flower. I mean,
Hmm.
and we know that scientifically it makes sense. And I think the same thing applies to curiosity. Imagine growing up in a household where the minute you ask a question, you say, shut up. Nobody asked you to say anything. Or, so therein the child, gradually you are, making sure that the child will never open their mouth. So
Mm-mm.
I have a problem with people saying he's such a disciplined, well disciplined child. I have a fundamental problem with that. And I have been told that your children are, fairly, rebellious and stuff. I said, on one hand, I can't have a curious, free thinker, independent child who will not rebel, because the way he looks at it, he's going to call out a lot of BS. And yes, society may find that uncomfortable, but at some point, I'll have to help him understand that I can't change everything today, or you will have to, understand that we let some things go. But maybe, I think I understand that you're frustrated with this, because if I don't validate his very genuine emotion, because see, for example, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So given online classes right now, okay, every kid is at their home, but we, unlike say maybe a remote schooling in the US versus remote schooling in India, I mean, I think back in the US things are much more laid back. If the child wants to have a drink of water in between, or just want to go to the loo and come back, it's not such a big respect issue. Versus in India, I think a lot of it becomes like, don't move, don't do this, don't do that. Why did you flinch? 2 hours, especially with the younger kids. I think expecting all that is kind of crazy. I think while we are having this discussion, I think you and I should have the freedom to sort of relax and see. While I'm doing telemedicine now, patients are seeing me in the comfort of their bedrooms.
Yeah.
They are actually sipping a cup of coffee. Am I going to say you are not respecting me because you're having coffee while I'm doing a consultation? No, I believe in making sure you are comfortable, I am comfortable too. So I
Mm-hmm.
think those are little, I think, biases that exist in society,
Okay.
and that is something where that all interferes with learning in terms of you telling. So again, coming back to the controlling environments,
Yeah.
our schools may have a philosophy, but the problem is every teacher comes with their own bias. And as parents, we have our own bias because we were parented a certain way. And
Correct.
a lot of times we do copy paste because our parents did this. Even if we do an iota better, we think that I think we did a great job. But the reality is we are not seeing where should we be as ideally as parents and work towards that goal. We are always looking at, okay, we are better than them. Instead of comparing ourselves as parents to another parent or to our parents, I
Mm.
think the better yardstick would be, what is the ultimate goal of me being a parent is to bring out the best in my child, to let my child grow to their fullest potential. So
Yeah.
if so, then that may need me to unlearn a lot of those dogmas that I have grown up with. So that's I've been trying to unpack a lot of my hidden biases. So as a teacher, I think
Okay.
it helps, because as a teacher, you notice a lot of your own biases coming up the minute it jars with
Correct.
who you are. I think you will notice that it's time to kind of start working on yourself.
Correct. I think it's very important to unlearn, relearn, and go about. I mean, it's something that we have learned. We should need to adapt to the circumstances or the experiences. We should not say I'm only right. Maybe that's where it should start, I guess. So I could quickly move to a couple of parents who would ask questions. I think one is on the screen by Mari Sir, who asked like, how could I know my kid is curious in particular areas? I guess that's what he had asked. It seems.
I think the general thing is, what are they generally asking you about? I mean, so if I was to say, their curiosity usually centers around certain things. So that's where the recurring questions are going to be centered around.
Mm,
And I think it is about understanding that, and I think it's about just letting it a little bit of freedom to let that evolve. I think very often we can't expect that a child who is at 5 is going to be curious about something. So my son was very curious, like my younger one was very curious about dinosaurs at
mm,
5 years of age. Today he's not curious about dinosaurs as much. He loves dinosaurs, but he's moved on to say Minecraft, or
okay.
he's moved on to a different. And the thing is, our passions evolve with time. So I can look back at myself as a parent or a researcher, and my research has taken a meandering journey. I mean, I started with something. I've been passionate about something. The passion has evolved into different parts, and I think the same goes. The key thing is the retaining the ability to be curious is sort of more important than,
Mm, mm,
like, worrying about what are they curious. Yes, as a parent, you may think what career plan are they going to be, and I think Unfortunately, the way our education systems are stuck, where you finish 12th grade and then you do a random stuff, and then you are, stuck. You have to again make a turn so early in life when you don't even know yourself into what career you're going to. And I think practically, if I was to profess the future, I think another 10 years from now, that's all going to be gone. Because I see again in my patients and people that I talk to, by 40, many people have changed career streams. And I see that far more in our younger, in the 20s, 30s people today than I see in our parents' generation. Where our parents' generation, it was just about a job that paid money.
Mm.
But the current generation, it is more about actually enjoying your work. It's because the paycheck is not the only thing that they're bothered about. So they actually want to feel satisfied, and
Yeah.
the fact that their work means something, it's adding to some purpose. So all
Mhm.
those makes them feel at unrest if they are, just dictated, and they tend to rebel. So that's why you see people going through very quick job changes. They did so nobody's staying engaged. Like you see, your parents worked at an organization for 20,
So
30,
many
40
years. Yeah.
and
Mm.
retired from that. I don't think that's going to happen with our younger generation. They're just going to be sampling, tasting, feeling, checking, and moving. And I think if we think that we have made them school and some college and one degree and that is going to be all set for life, that's something as stupid as that couldn't happen.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And I just, this is one of the important question I feel from Kavita ma'am. So she says, but how do you react when your kid is treated differently?
It
Because
hurts.
follow up to
It
that, she
hurts.
also have one more. I'll also show that.
It
Uh,
hurts, Savita. To be very honest, it hurts. It used to hurt a lot more.
mm,
I would say, but over time, I've realized I can't change the world. I can't change every teacher. But I have tried, because see, this is the real world that they are going to be out into. So this is what I've realized. I can't go and fix every environment for him. I will have to help him learn to navigate those environments. It
mm,
might need him to learn to communicate better, speak up for himself, advocate for himself. So all those are, and the more important thing is, I love you as you are. I think that's the central message as parents that we need to communicate to our kids, that I don't think you any less. There are times when my older son has said, what is so great about, I'm useless. Everybody thinks I'm useless. And I've told him, no, no, no. I mean, nobody can take your place for me. And I think gradually I have seen that have a positive effect on him. And now, even if he gets disillusioned, it's easier for him to jump right back. And I think that is the single most insulation, or what I call emotional resilience. That
mm,
is something we need to develop in our kids. Because see, it's like saying, for example, you do great at school, you meet all the records. If tomorrow in your job, you have a terrible boss, he yells at you, and suddenly, and he says you're fired. Okay, and there goes all your self-worth out. You could go drunk, you could be shattered. You could have been an A student all your life, and then you go out of the window. So somewhere or the other, I tell my boys, go ahead, flunk right now if you really, I mean, it's not the big deal. I see, as a doctor, I've seen colleagues who have gone on to med school, have not taken two entrances to get to MBBS, then two entrances to get to MD, then to this thing. So somewhere or the other, 5, 6 years of your life, you're pretty much writing away anyway. So you might as well take 1 or 2 years off while I'm available with you. And if you can learn a few life skills about how to survive life, I think we are better off than in many other things.
okay. Great. I think if some more questions are there, we're almost like 5:15 now. So as to sum up things, I mean, I'd like to see if we could have a sum up of what we have discussed. I mean, some points that you feel could be taken away by parents who are seeing this. You have given some wonderful perspectives from your experiences. So something that we should take, maybe start right now, maybe start immediately. What could be that
I
thing?
think the way I look at it is simple, Harish. Our kids are going to be with us for only so long. The way I look at it, I have an eighth grader and a fifth grader. In 4 years, my eighth grader is going to leave home in
Mm,
whatever form be done with school. So I have, the way I look at it, I have only 4 more years to be there for him and help him learn all the soft skills he needs to navigate life, which are not taught in schools. And I think if as a parent, that is my primary responsibility: how to deal with failure, how
Hmm.
to bounce back after failure, how to not think less of himself. I mean, in terms of knowing what he's good at, and help him understand his own strengths, help him understand its own weakness. That it's okay to have weakness. I am not perfect. I struggle. So I actually expose my struggle to them. I show my very real emotions when I'm sad, when I'm hurt. I tell them, and a lot of times they have been they have actually helped me talk through things. So
Okay.
my oldest son coined two words in some ways, and I think that was a very good analogy, which I think many parents can find that useful. He called it a calm bank and a love calm tank and a love tank. Okay,
Okay.
so it means that when he's stressed, say for example there are exams coming and he feels he's not going to do, so he starts getting stressed. He's like, I'm feeling stressed. So he's starting to explain and voice that I'm anxious, I'm stressed. So what he comes for, then I give him a hug. We say, okay, let's switch off, let's step out on the balcony, let's look out, get some deep breaths in. And somewhere or the other, when he's feeling very upset with himself, all he would say, I need hugs. So
Hmm.
somewhere or the other, and I think in Indian society, typically we don't hug our boys enough. And I think because I think maybe even girls to some extent, because I think touch is a very important soothing agent. And I think we need to do more of that, because I can notice like a fundamental difference in philosophy of my parents. Like when my son is now 12, but he's 5'5", 5'6". So when he goes to hug my dad, his grandfather, when
Hmm.
he used to be all head over heels with him at some point, today he's like, no, but you're a grown boy now. Please don't come near me. So, and the child comes to me and says, I think, Daryl doesn't love me anymore. So it's like what you do and what the child takes away is very different messages. So until you check with your child, this can all damage their sense of self-worth. They are going to, when you tell them, man up. And I think that is not manning up, because I think when we do that to kids, when they go on to their adult relationships and coming back from, my work on relationship health, that
Hmm.
leads to poorer marriage satisfaction.
Hmm.
And it's like we are not giving them the right tools which they will need in their real lives. They will be standoffish from their kids. They will be the boss of their kids. They will be the boss to their spouses. And I think that's like the wrong way to model things. They will not learn to be more, to be vulnerable, to be okay with expressing their emotions, to be crying, to be saying that they don't know how to proceed. And I think those are all things that we need to encourage boys and girls to be, instead of asking them to toughen it up.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sona. I think it was a wonderful conversation. So I'm not a parent yet, but still there is a lot of learning as an educator. I'm going through what I'm doing. But I'm sure like the parents who are watching this would also like benefited that if I mean you parents, if you're watching this, you could post your feedback and appreciation to Dr. Sona, because we feel that we can learn. We can learn and adapt. That's very important, and that's a important reason for doing this series. Instead of me speaking about curiosity, why can't we have a conversation on that skill? And now through the conversation, we are getting more ideas to take it forward and then go ahead. So we are thought of doing this every week. As you said, soft skills, we thought of picking one skill and then diving deeper with a lot of other people and throw lights, so that that could create one more conversation maybe in the chat, or parents could discuss with the kids. They could start going after this conversation. They could even have a tight hug with the kids. So with all these, that's what it's very important, I guess. So I think I have one more question from a parent. If you're fine, we can do
So
that. Yeah. uh, I think it's a pretty long question. Maybe I can read it. My daughter wants to become a doctor, and she's very sure about it. Even for work, she never accepts any other profession. Can this make her stress when she doesn't become a doctor, and how to overcome?
I think it can, because it is a long journey. But that being said, if you're really passionate about, see, looking back, maybe if I was to look back 20 years ago, I hadn't realized that it would be such a long journey to be a doctor. And when I see my doctor friends today looking disillusioned, it pains me. because I know how much of effort they've all put in to be at this point. And today, with the pandemic happening, I see so many of them frustrated and sad. And I have been trying to tell them, how do we inspire our next generation to be doctors when we as doctors don't show our passion for what we do, and what we are really feeling that it was a waste of our time, we screwed our lives. I think it can very and I think if somebody is really caring, wants to do something, I think your daughter, I think it's okay, if she wants to work hard for it, she will not be stressed by it, because and some ways what I've realized is, I think a lot of this priming sometimes is also because we attribute intelligence to some of these things, which is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There are, so if I was to now look back and break down why I wanted to be a doctor, I really just wanted to help to, and what I now realize, I could do that in so many other ways. I mean, that was the only visible thing that I knew of back then.
Okay.
So maybe now that people are exposed to a lot more careers, I think I think they will have a very different view of all these things too as they grow up.
Okay. We'll just take this one last question because I feel this is very important, and what news we are seeing around. How can we overcome depression? And because a lot of news we are seeing now, we are getting stressed with the current situation. And
No, I've been writing about this in the last, it's been something which I've been very passionate about. See, I personally believe depression happens because we feel that we have nobody to talk to who will listen to us non-judgmentally and with love. Many of us, including our kids and us adults, don't have that one go-to person who loves us for just who we are. Having had that now, I understand. I have gone through, a phase of depression myself, and I realized that it was because I was really lonely in my earlier marriage. And having had that companionship and that deep friendship today, I understand a lot of our kids don't have that skills to form those deep friendships. And in the era of technology or AI, and them being online and digital, if we don't actively teach them those skills of how to build relationships, I think we'll end up with far more depression and mental health issues behind the scenes, where nobody will actually even see, because right now we're all stuck behind our screens. And if we don't even know who's hurting behind screens, we will end up with far more cases of suicides and depressions getting much worse as the days go along. But we just need a compassionate friend, somebody to talk to. As they say, coffee with your friend, is the best therapy you need. It's true, but a lot of times friends jump in and advise. Sometimes you just don't need that. You just need somebody to just be there. That's
great. Wonderful conversation. Once again, thank you, Dr. Sona. I think.
Thanks, Harish, for. I think it was an honor. I think. Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
Thanks for the quick response, because I asked you at the very last minute, but you were like, you told like, let's do it. And since you said okay, then that gave us motivation to kickstart this whole series. So
Sure.
otherwise, it could have been even postponed. So thanks for that. And to the parents who are watching this, we are planning to do this series every Sunday, since we started 5 o'clock this week. So we thought of fixing the same time and go about every week, so that we would interact and uncover new skills, and we'll dive deeper into it, and then hope that could add value to you. So once again, thank you. And parents, you will also have a web form in the chat boxes right now. So in case if you want to get notifications about the regular webinars, you can sign up there with your mail ID, so that we could intimate that through the mail. So thank you. Wonderful. And
Thank you all for a patient listening.
sorry, I didn't get you. Yeah.
Thanks everybody for a patient listening.
I think they would have enjoyed. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.